Shalom, Israel. This is Will and Larry with For Israel. Let's not waste time and continue explaining more of Matthew chapter 24.
Matthew chapter 24, verse 42. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come.
Watch is a reference to keeping the commandments, which includes paying attention to the events in Matthew chapter 24 by using precepts of God. The proof is in Revelation chapter 16, verse 15. Let's get it.
Revelation chapter 16, verse 15. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame.
The Lord coming as a thief is the same thing as him saying that we don't know the hour of his arrival. Keeping garments is the same as keeping the commandments according to Psalms 132, verse 9. Let's read another verse that repeats the contents of Matthew chapter 24, verse 42.
Matthew chapter 24, verse 44. Therefore be ye also ready, for at such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh.
Ready in this verse has the same meaning as watch in verse 42. Revelation chapter 19, verse 7 says the same thing. Let's read another verse that repeats this trend.
Matthew 24, verse 36. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only.
Now read John chapter 5, verse 25.
John chapter 5, verse 25. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the hour is coming, and now is when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear shall live.
This information links up with Matthew chapter 27, verses 50 to 53 that we explained earlier. The angels in Matthew chapter 24, verse 36 are people that don't have the understanding to bring the kingdom. This is what has been said throughout the entire chapter. Revelation chapter 5, verses 1 through 5 backs this understanding up. Let's read the verses.
Revelation chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. And I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within, and on the backside sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, Who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof? And no man in heaven nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereon. And I wept much, because no man was found worthy to open and to read the book, neither to look thereon. And one of the elders saith unto me, Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof.
Now, let's go back to Matthew and read the verses that say the same thing. Remember that no man knows when salvation will arrive. If someone is saying that they know, they are false prophets. Use this information to get the understanding of what we are about to read.
We're reading Matthew chapter 24, verse 5. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Verse 11. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. Verse 23. Then if any shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. 24. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall shew great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Verse 26. Wherefore if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not.
Let's read Matthew chapter 24, verse 35 to find out what salvation will replace.
Matthew chapter 24, verse 35. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away.
Salvation will replace the captivity that people are spiritually in. Let's get a precept for it. Please pay attention to how the words passed away are used.
2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new.
Let's move on to verse 38 of Matthew chapter 24.
Matthew chapter 24, verse 38. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until that day that Noah entered into the ark.
The eating, drinking, and marrying are referring to not keeping the commandments. Let's get precepts for drinking.
Isaiah 28, verse 7. But they also have erred through wine and through strong drink, are out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They are swallowed up of wine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. Isaiah 29 and 9. Stay yourselves and wonder. Cry ye out and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. Verse 10. For the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes. The prophets and your rulers, the seers, hath he covered.
Now let's get the biblical definition of eating for Matthew chapter 24, verse 39.
Hebrews chapter 13, verse 9. Be not carried about with diverse and strange doctrines, for it is a good thing that the heart be established with grace, not with meats, which have not profited them that have been occupied therein.
Now let's deal with the marrying by going back to the days of Noah. Please read Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 and 2.
And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, that they took them wives of all which they chose.
This means that Israelites during the time period were following the customs of the heathens instead of the laws of God. This could be a lesson all by itself. Let's stay on topic and go to another precept for understanding for now. Let's read from Luke chapter 17, verses 26 to 28. Please pay attention to how the days of Lot were like the days of Noah. The word likewise in verse 28 proves the point.
Luke chapter 17, verse 26. And it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives. They were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, also as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded.
Please read Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 and 39.
Matthew chapter 24, verse 37. But as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. And knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be.
Now these verses are saying that the way that the flood literally destroyed people during the time of Noah is just like how false doctrines of scriptures will prevent people from getting the real understanding of the scriptures. Let's prove it first by proving that the flood is referring to false doctrines. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27 gives understanding. But we are going to read Hebrews chapter 13, verse 9 again.
Be not carried about with diverse and strange doctrines, for it is a good thing that the heart be established with grace, not with meats which have not profited them that have been occupied therein.
The strange doctrines is referring to the flood, and the words carried about are referring to the word took in Matthew chapter 24, verse 39. Let's deal more with this word took. The word took is used as the word taken in the next two verses of Matthew chapter 24. Let's get understanding on this word before we read the next two verses. The word took can be negative or positive. We've recently explained how it is used in the negative context in Matthew chapter 24, verse 39. Let's get a precept to prove it.
Second Esdras, chapter 13. I'm going to read verses 16 through 18, 21, 22, and 23. Verse 16, for as I conceive in mine understanding, woe unto them that shall be left in those days, and much more woe unto them that are not left behind. For they that was not left were in heaviness. Now understand now things that are laid up in the latter days, what shall happen unto them and to those that are left behind. Verse 21, the interpretation of the vision shall I show thee. I will open unto thee the thing that thou hast required. Whereas thou hast spoken of them that are left behind, this is the interpretation. He that shall endure the peril in that time hath kept himself, that they be fallen into danger, are such as have works and faith toward the Almighty.
Now, since we know what taken is referring to, let's read Matthew chapter 24, verse 40.
Then shall two be left in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left.
The field is the world. That means that the verse is saying that two groups of people, which are sinners and Christians, will be in the world, and that the Christians will receive the correct understanding of the Bible by being left, and the sinners won't receive the correct understanding of the Bible by being taken. The 5 foolish virgins and 5 wise virgins in the next chapter are a representation of the two groups of people. Let's move on to the next scripture in Matthew chapter 24.
Matthew chapter 24, verse 41. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill. The one shall be taken, and the other left.
This is a repeat of the previous verse. The 2 women is referring to the 2 groups that we just mentioned. Now let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 12 to get understanding on the grinding at the mill. It is referring to keeping the commandments by teaching the people. Please read Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 3 and 4. This will be a reference to the ones that are taken. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 9 will be a reference to the ones that are left.
Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 3 and 4. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease, because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened. And the door shall be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. Verse 9. And moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge, yea, he gave good heed, and sought out and set in order many proverbs.
Now we're going to move on with the breakdown. But first, let's give a little bit of insight to a future series that we hope the Lord lets us cover. The positive context of taking is what happened to Enoch and a few others. Wisdom of Solomon chapter 4 verse 11 gives a little bit of insight of the lesson about it. Now, some teachings about these verses refer to a rapture by UFOs, etc. Are these breakdowns of the scriptures correct? They could be, but we are dealing with what the Bible explains and not some captivating stories that cause the ears of the people to itch. That is a reference to 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. Now back to the lesson. We already covered verse 42. Let's discuss verse 43.
Matthew 24, verse 43. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would have not suffered his house to be broken up.
The good man of the house is once again referring to 2 sets of people. It follows the same pattern of verses 38 through 40. You see how understanding comes when you go precept upon precept. Verse 45 mentions the good teacher, and verse 48 mentions the bad teacher. We will deal more with these verses soon. The thief in verse 43 for sinners is referring to the flood that is mentioned in verse 39. The thief in verse 43 is referring to Christ for Christians. The verse in Revelation chapter 16 verse 15 that we read earlier in the series proves this. We're going to prove it again soon. Watched in Matthew chapter 24 verse 43 is referring to keeping the commandments. We've already proven that too. Suffered in Matthew chapter 24 verse 43 means allowed. Now Matthew chapter 24 verse 43 says the following. Christians, in particular leaders, will not allow false doctrines to allow people to sin and fall out of the truth. Let's continue. We've already dealt with verse 44. Verses 45 through 51 give details to the main point of verse 43. Please read Matthew chapter 24, verse 45.
Matthew 24, verse 45. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord has made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season?
This verse is referring to the good man of the house that watched in verse 43. Let's read about their reward.
Matthew 24, verse 46. Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods.
The good leaders will lead over God's people, and none of the bad teachers will rule over God's people. Blessed, in verse 45, is referring to the words ruler over all his goods in verse 46. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2 proves that the goods is referring to the commandments. When you have time, please read Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 1 through 14 to get understanding on the definition of the word blessed. Make sure that you pay attention to the word as it is used multiple times in that chapter. Please read the next verse in Matthew chapter 24.
Matthew chapter 24, verse 48. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming.
Now, we are dealing with the good man of the house that didn't watch in Matthew chapter 24, verse 43. Please proceed.
And shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken.
Smite, eat, and drink with the drunken is referring back to verse 38. It means that the person isn't keeping the commandments. Teachers that don't properly teach the law aren't keeping the commandments. More information on the word smite is covered in Matthew chapter 25, verses 41 through 45. It is just referring to not keeping the commandments. Not helping people that are in need of understanding or other resources is a form of sinning. Let's go to the next verse.
Matthew 24, verse 50. The Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of.
This is referring to the Lord coming like a thief to sinners. We've already explained this. Let's read the last verse.
Verse 51. And shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Wicked sinners, including wicked teachers, won't have a place in the kingdom. The Lord will cut evil servants asunder, which means removing them from teaching and receiving biblical blessings with the Bible by having them to be discovered as liars. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 12 and 13 talks a little about this sword. Let's read the two verses.
Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12 and 13. For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit, and of the joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intent of the heart. Neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and open unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do.
Let's end this lesson with two verses. Please pay attention to how the word pass is used in both verses.
Matthew 24, verse 34 and 35. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away.
The false doctrines that are misleading the people will end when all the things that we covered in this series takes place. This can only happen when enough people start to keep the commandments. If you like this series, please subscribe so that you can receive notifications when we upload videos in the future. We have more series like this one that we plan on making in the future if it is the Lord's will. The breakdown of the first few chapters of Genesis, the entire book of Revelation, each commandment, hell, salvation, and many other topics. We might even revisit this topic because we left a lot of information out to finish the breakdown.
Sirach chapter 33, verse 17. Consider that I labor not for myself only, but for all them that seek learning.
Shalom.